I know of no one among German-speaking sociologists and political scientists who examine the question of the well-being of people and society so profoundly and broadly at the same time as he. In doing so, he sees himself, like Erich Fromm, as standing in the tradition of a critical theory. For him, his work on acceleration and alienation today is a starting point for the crucial question of a humanistic transformation. What human potentials people and society can develop in order to shape their relationship to the world in resonance, and thus enable them to achieve a responsibility. Not only his questions, but also his answers show so much inner affinity to what Fromm tried to grasp with a productive orientation and the being mode of existence, that I cannot imagine a better speaker to open this third International Erich Fromm Research Conference than the 2018 Fromm awardee, you, dear Professor Rosa. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I really, we have it's now really a long time of cooperation, right, with Rainer Funk, but also with Thomas Kühner, with the IPU. I told Christa Roda-Daxa, I met her in the elevator and said whenever the IPU is calling, I come along because I've also intensely cooperated with Beninia Gerisch and her team in a very, for me, a very important project. So it's really a pleasure for me to be here, and particularly in the context of the Erich Fromm Society and the Study Center and the conference. But I'm not sure whether I'm a good speaker. I hope so, I'll do my best. But I have to say that I'm very close to changing my mind. It's been a gradual process over the last 3 years or so of 2000, starting with the pandemics in 2019, because in 2019, I think, I would have exactly said what you said, right? Let's not go for a technical transhumanist form of transformation, but let's try to bring out the human capacities to its fullest, right? What a human being can be. And there is promise, and that's what we should do. But I think let's face it, maybe we should just give up. I mean, really, I'm deadly serious. We are too stupid. It's obvious. I mean, look at this. Where are we in 2023, right? We have two big problems which we just experienced over the last couple of years. One is the Seuche, the plague, the epidemics, right, with COVID. The other is war coming back. Right? We kill each other to the most brutal way we are capable of doing. Now, war and plague are the most ancient, the most vintage, the most age-old problems of humankind. We have not really made a single step forward. We just are too stupid. I mean, we have achieved some things, right? We have invented the nuclear bomb. We did the Holocaust. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, that's what we are doing as human beings. We are killing the planet and its biodiversity, and we are getting the climate over its tipping point. Do you really want to tell me that this human being is so valuable that we should preserve it? I'm inclined to say let's get rid of it as quickly as possible. We are an abomination, an error to creation. I'm really furious. I think we should really seriously think about this. We are all convinced here, oh no, the human being and its potential. Now where is it? The plague and war. So, okay, but since I did not write my lecture today, but yesterday I had I will now go back and deliver the lecture you probably wanted me to deliver. because I really thought I mean, this is the outline. I mean, of what I want to do, right? I mean, come up with this concept, develop it a bit, the responsibility as a form of where a humanistic. Now I go back. I'm the old. I'm the 2019 Rosa. Let's go back to a humanistic form of transformation, right? And my idea is that actually the specificity, maybe that's the last hope, that human beings are capable of what Hannah Arendt calls natality, right? Starting anew, making a break, and starting anew, which actually I think is something that AI, artificial intelligence, or robots will not be able to do. So I want to point out why we need transformation and what this transformation could potentially consist in, right? With the idea of responsibility, which is just actually which is an element, or maybe the core of resonance. I decided to not talk about Erich Fromm really, because that's, you know, in German we call it Eulen nach Athen tragen. I'm not sure whether you can do this in English, right? Carrying owls to Athens. Because you are the experts on Erich Fromm, and it's obvious, as Rainer Funk has said, that I get a lot of inspiration from Erich Fromm, and that a lot of my thinking is really very close to what Erich Fromm did. But I thought it's no point trying to convince you of some points Erich Fromm has made probably much more forcefully than I have. So instead, I really thought, this is preliminary remarks, right? Let's quickly I want to quickly think about what's the difference between a transhumanist transformation or post-humanist transformation, which really, as you have said, right, is the topic of the day, right? And maybe a more humanist form of transformation. This, of course, brings us to the question of what is specific about human beings. It's really interesting. It's really interesting because I have a lot of students, and also people working with me at the Jena University. And some of them really insist that AI, artificial intelligence, can do everything we can do as human beings, maybe without our flaws, right? So the question really would be, they say, well, how do we know that they don't feel, for example, right? And they are certainly creative and so on. Depends on what we mean by creativity. Maybe Erich Fromm would have disagreed. So it's an interesting question to ask, well, what is specific about human beings, which probably AI or robots will not be able to do? And there yes, okay, this is obvious, right? So I think I just wanted, as preliminary remarks, make a few suggestions what could be new. I really think that AI, at least as in the sense I understand it, and as far as it works today, probably will lack the capacity of natality, because it will kind of, so far what the even chat GPT and so on does is kind of bringing together what is already there, right? Developing algorithms on the basis of what is there. But really starting anew, I'm not sure. I think probably AI will not be able to do this. But human beings, I think, you know, I started not with Erich Fromm in my thinking, but with Charles Taylor. And he tried to develop what he calls philosophical anthropology, asking what are human beings. And in my dissertation, I tried to reconstruct it. And no, it's not actually, it's his. Charles Taylor says, what a human beings are self-interpreting beings, right? So what we really are is not given by nature, but it's at least co-constructed by our interpretations of ourselves, right? So trying to make sense of our existence is an essential feature of what a human being is, right? And this attempt to make sense of ourselves is done with the help, or on the basis of what Taylor calls strong evaluations, namely, well, he says, and this is what I bought from him, I'm convinced to this day, and a lot of my own writings really follow on this idea. I would even claim resonance requires strong evaluations, and strong evaluations is the idea, the feeling, the conviction that we are in touch with something out there that is a source of value in itself, right? A weak evaluation is that we want to have things, right? I want to have that, I want to have something else, maybe I want to have a beer. I always take this example. Maybe I should psychoanalytically think about why I always end up with beer example. I don't particularly like beer, but in my village there's a brewery, so I don't know. So let's say I want beer, that's a weak evaluation, right? A strong evaluation is the idea that there is something out there which is valuable, not because I want it, but valuable in itself, right? So for believers, it could be God, for example, right? God is not valuable because I like him or want him or need him, but he is a source of value. And for those who are not religious, there are other things, right? If you're a total dedicated fan of Beethoven or Wagner, right, you would insist that there is something in this music which is a source of value, whether human beings accept it or not. Or if you're an ecologist, deep ecology, right, then the idea is that there is something in nature, maybe in the glaciers or somewhere else, which is a source of value in itself. But however, whatever the source of strong or the source of the values might be, Taylor says we do self-interpretation on our. It's a perception which maybe comes before cognition, something out there that we are in touch with and that speaks to us. So I really think if we want to formulate a humanism which can face the challenges by AI. We could maybe start with these two things, right? Being self-interpreting beings and doing the self-interpretation on the basis of strong evaluations. And what I already said that we also have the capacity to start anew on this basis, right? To change, to leave the tracks. Forgiveness for Hannah Arendt is very important, right? Not someone hits you and then you have to hit back, but you can actually stop the process, right? That might be very important. And I will come back to this, because I really believe that processes of resonance are exactly the moments, intense moments of resonance are the moments where natality is born, so to speak, where the new is coming from or is started. So, but in order to, I mean, I really, that's the point I want to get at. But I'm really now a fan of this word "aufhören." It's a German word, right? But I think that's really in Hannah Arendt's idea of natality, right? To aufhören means to stop, of course, to not continue along the path we have already gone, the path we have already taken, but to stop. But in German, aufhören does not just mean to stop, to not continue, but it means to listen, and to listen upwards, you could say, right? Auf is upwards, and hören is listen. And I almost have a literal sense of what that means, right? In our society, where we are all, I've written over and over again on this, we are all kind of running to deal with our to-do lists. I have to do that, this, I have to do that, I have to answer this, and so on, right? And aufhören might be the essential quality there, right? To stop and listen and be, and now there's the idea by Bruno Latour, which I always take, to feel called by something out there that calls me. And this process, this capacity to stop, in my view, is the core of the transformation we need, right? To stop and listen, and then we become responsible again, right? Listening and answering is the core element of resonance, and therefore of the transformation we need, I claim. So, but now let's get a bit more systematic about this. Why do we need transformation? I don't want to go into this at length, but my short form, that's the sociological part, right? Is the claim that this society is the fabric of society is in need of transformation at a most existential level. I think Erich Fromm, to mention him at least once, right, had a very strong sense of this. It was from also Adorno and Marcuse, right? It's not that there is something wrong in the institutions of modern society or just in the way of in the modes of production or so. There is a problem in the whole mode of existence of a modern society, right? It's at the very heart of our Weltbeziehung, that was my term, right? Form of relating to the world. But it has an institutional structural fabric, and that's what I call dynamic stabilization, and you see the definition here on the slides. Dynamic stabilization is what defines our modern capitalist society, which means, and you find a lot of this in Fromm, right, that we need to achieve growth, acceleration, and to come up with incessantly come up with innovations in order to simply stay where we are. But this is so, I would really say this is so irrational, so stupid, right? We have to achieve economic growth. Everyone wants to achieve growth. The Germans, the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese, and the World Bank, and everyone. If you talk to economists or so, they're absolutely sure we need to achieve growth, not in order because there is some scarcity of something, but because otherwise we cannot maintain our structure. And you know, this morning I talked to, it's really interesting, to economists, but not just, you know, natural scientists who really work in, they even work in, they work in chemistry and other things. They're working on good things, namely dealing with climate crisis and so on. But there you could see they really claim we need to make a disruptive change. And then you ask, well, why is disruption a value in itself? I mean, that's stupid too, in my view, right? As if you talk to young people, they all want to make disruptive changes. Why? Because because that's the way our society stabilizes itself, right? Innovations, just for the sake of the innovation, not, of course, well, for economic reasons. But I don't want to really develop this because then the time would be up. But this is my definition. We live in a society which permanently needs to accelerate, to innovate, to make disruptive changes and to achieve growth in order to keep the number of jobs, the companies, the healthcare system, the educational system, the cultural system, the IPU, and many other things, right? So actually that would be interesting. Well, I don't know. I wanted to discuss this with the Karl Schlecht Stiftung, right? What kind of leaders do we really need? I mean, of course, a single leader or even a generation of leaders cannot change the structural logic, right? That's what I mean. It's not enough to come up with new foundations or with new laws even, but we need to change the mode of existence, really. Okay, but with this structural a feature of modern society. As I said, it goes together with a certain form of living, with a mode of relating to the world, and this you can see from Fromm and from also Adorno or Marcuse, right? It's the aspiration. Structurally, it's the need, but culturally, it's the aspiration to gain control over the world, to make the world controllable, right? I use the German term, as you know, verfügbar machen, right? And you cannot translate Verfügbarmachung into English. So the book title was Uncontrollable. It's a small book. Uncontrollability, Unverfügbarkeit. Uncontrollability is Unverfügbarkeit. So controllability is Verfügbarkeit. But when I translate it for myself, I call it culturally the AAA horizon of the good life. And what I mean is, it's a kind of way of relating to the world which aims for the expansion or the extension of the horizon of what we can make available, attainable, and accessible, right? Make more of the world visible, make more of it accessible. People want to go places, they want to see things, and not just individually, also collectively, right? We developed telescopes to see into further and further into the universe, but then also satellites and rockets to get there, right? And microscopes and other things to get into matter. So it's the aspiration and the need to make the world visible, accessible, controllable, and put it to use. In all forms, technology always, it's science which makes things available, attainable, accessible. Then it's technology which allows us to go places, to see places, and so on, to control places like in this environment. Normally there would be an air conditioner, right? Make it hot, make it cold, make it bright, make it bright light or dark night, and so on. So culturally, it's the idea of making the world available, attainable, accessible, and you see our concepts, our structural, our institutions of science serve that purpose, making the world controllable, accessible, attainable, available, or technology, but also the economy, right? Creating wealth allows us to make the world controllable, to go wherever you want to go, to see whatever you want to see, to buy whatever you want to buy, and so on, right? So on the one hand, the structural fabric of modern society is geared towards control, domination, and the cultural logic, so to speak, it's a fit. This is why I call it the modern social formation. It has a structural side. We need permanent development, growth, innovation, acceleration. But there is also a cultural motor, right? We want to make the world available. We want to bring it under our control and thereby kill the biophilic part of it, right? And the result of this, I claim, and there psychology kicks in, right? The result of this is a mode of aggression towards the world, right? I mean, so this is, and it's a bad form of aggression, I would claim, right? So even when you get up in the morning, right, the very first, I find it, I always make, it's a pun, but I think it's quite insightful. How do we get up in the morning? Because, you know, our relationship to the world is really, I think we can really read it off the phases of going to sleep and waking up in the morning, because when you wake up, we wake up to a world which is out there, right? And actually when you go to sleep, you somehow have to trust that world, right? You give up your standpoint, right? You lie down and you have to trust in the world which will carry you until the next day. And if you have a problem with that, then you have sleeping disorders and you need a sleeping pill and so on, right? And how do we get up in the morning? Not when we slept enough or when the sun comes up or maybe when the cock crows, but it's the alarm clock which wakes you up, right? So you are alarmed to the world. The bus is coming, or the meeting starts, or whatever it is, right? And my idea is that this is basically how we get to the day. It's in a mode of aggression. So the world becomes, basically in the to-do list, the world becomes a point of attack, or a series of points of attack, right? I have to do this, I have to do that. I mean, you see it, I mean, if you do, a lot of you deal with real human beings, and some of them might be patients or people in a therapy, right? And I think there you can really see that this kind of aggression starts on the very first moment. We did it, Benina Gerisch particularly did it, and with her team, right? When people, for example, they enter the bathroom in the morning, and immediately you see what the point of attack is. I mean, they measure their blood pressure, it's too high. They step on, they weigh their weight, they step on the scales, it's too high. They watch their face, I have to get rid of that spot, or I have to get it controlled, or whatever it is, or you have to deal with the hair, I need the hairdresser. So all of these are points of attack. The world is a kind of series of points of attack, and action becomes domination to deal with this. So reality is permanently experienced as resistance. I think reality is always also resistance for human beings, but here it's a kind of, it's reduced to resistance. I leave that aside, it takes too long. I mean, I find it quite interesting when you actually think of modern social philosophy and modern accounts of modernity. I mean, I realize, for example, Charles Taylor says modernity is a spiritual declaration of independence from nature, right? And we want to control nature, basically, right? No longer do what kind of nature says or does or whatever it wants, which I think is good to some extent. But it's also a spiritual declaration of independence from history. It's no longer that we do what our forebears and ancestors have done. We want to make a disruptive change to history, right? And we want to make a disruptive change with the community. Don't do what all the others do, right? Quite to the contrary. Come up with disruptive change and make things anew. So modernity is you break with tradition and convention, and to a large extent even to our bodies. And you know, resonance does not suggest the opposite. Simply do what tradition and convention tells you, or what the community tells you, or what history tells you, or what nature tells you. I mean, this is very important for me. I really read modern culture as kind of being stuck between these two options, right? Some suggest that we should not listen to nature because nature is also brutal and deficient, but we do it, right? Even down to our bodies or so. Or let's not continue the course of history, but let's break with it. And the others suggest the opposite. We have to listen to nature and be true to nature, and let nature tell you what you need to do, right? Or let history tell you what you need to do if you're an identitarian or so, or listen to the community or the body. Listen to your body and do what the body says. Resonance does not suggest that. Resonance is the idea of taking those other points, nature, history, the body, as a kind of serious counterparts. There's something out there speaking, but you are answering, and answering might sometimes mean to say no. Right? If you're a German, you're very much inclined to say no to your history, at least to huge parts of it, right? So resonance does not mean simply do what the community, the history, nature tells you, right? But it says don't ignore it, right? Don't simply deny it, but get in a relationship of listening and answering. So this is how you gain responsibility. But right now I'm I'm still in the phase, in the part of my presentation where I want to say what is going wrong. And what is going wrong is still the idea that we live in a kind of, we follow the paradigm of sovereignty and autonomy, connected to the AAA horizon, availability, attainability, accessibility of the good life. And this leads to a culture, to a form of life, which is basically a form of aggression towards the world. I leave that aside now. As Benigna knows, I'm a great fan of the term of parametric optimization, but I leave this, maybe we'll discuss it over the buffet later on, right? What I rather want to turn to is the idea that our attempt to control the world it leads to disastrous and very interesting consequences. I think it leads to the opposite. The world becomes uncontrollable, and it becomes uncontrollable in a monstrous form. I find this really interesting. I mean, you could say that the world has always been uncontrollable, right? Nature or history or fate or whatever it is. I mean, very often peoples over the course of history had some conception of fate. But actually this fate is in most cultures we know of somehow conceived of as a kind of resonant counterpart, right? Somehow, for example, if it's God, right? Of course, you cannot control God, right? But somehow in the Jewish tradition, for example, I was really struck when I read that you can actually argue with God. He might change his mind, right? So the idea is that's not a monstrous uncontrollability. It's a kind of uncontrollability you have to deal with. I mean, the disease is very interesting. I mean, this is something which might speak to some of you dealing with patients or so on, right? How do you, even our own psyche, right? I mean, it's not controllable. You cannot just do away with the traits, the problematic traits or whatever is painful for us, right? But we can try to get into a resonant form, listening and answering, reacting to it, trying to find a way. It's like arguing or negotiating, right? And I think really we as a modern society have lost that capacity, right? Now there is a lot of uncontrollability in our world, and my claim is there's even more and more uncontrollability, but it's non-responsive, it's not resonant, it's monstrous. And therefore, my claim is really, I wonder what you think about this, that in all aspects of our life and society, we kind of go back and forth between the desire, and sometimes we are very good at it, of almost getting omnipotent, controlling our life, nature, history, and so on, and then feeling completely powerless, right? It's this dichotomy going back and forth between omnipotence and powerlessness, which I think is in psychology very well known. But look at the examples. When I thought of it, I found it really interesting. I mean, the example which strikes me most maybe is really nuclear power, because I've made this argument many times, so hopefully I don't bore you, but I still find it interesting to think about. Nuclear, when we developed the capacity to split the atom, right, nuclear fissure, so to speak, it was Oppenheimer and his team, and they really felt a rush of power, a surge of power, right? They actually put it in this phrase that we are now becoming godlike, creator-like. We have reached the inner heart of matter. We can control it, at least we can split it. So it was almost a sense of getting close to omnipotence. But you know, the problem with nuclear power is it can easily kind of turn around, and then we feel totally powerless in the face of a nuclear disaster, either a bomb or an exploding power station. So you see how the promise of omnipotence is related to an experience of powerlessness, and I think this is true to our whole relationship towards nature. We have become better and better to control it in many aspects. We have become able to completely dominate it. So we are omnipotent, right? I mean, I claim always, even in a room like this, we decide whether it's hot or cold. Okay, not here, but in other rooms. We decide whether it's bright light or dark night. We decide whether there is loud heavy metal music or total silence, and so on, right? So we have become omnipotent over nature in many aspects, right? But then, of course, we know the ecological disaster. The problem is, in fact, we don't control nature. We destroy it and will be destroyed by this process. So that's the total opposite of control. It's powerlessness. That's what people feel in the face of the climate disaster and the biodiversity disaster. And this is what made me tell you that I think we should go for the transhumanist revolution or transformation instead. And I believe, and this is, so to speak, my latest idea, that you can even interpret the current political crisis along these terms, what we call the democratic crisis, however you call it, You see it in the United States, but you see it in Europe as well. You see it everywhere, right? I think a problem which, the promise of democracy, of modern politics, is omnipotence. All the power should rest with the people, not with the king, not with the church, not with the forebears and the ancestors or history, but with the people. We are omnipotent. That's the great promise of democracy. You can do whatever you want, right? Somehow. But the real experience of people is powerlessness, right? Oh, I put this in German. I'm sorry. You see, I was so furious about this, right? That's popular sovereignty, right? That all the power should rest with the people. And then people feel kind of politically powerless. You can't do anything in the face of global connections, the financial markets, the media logic of Washington. I mean, it's the powerlessness is put in terms like Washington in the US or the EU, Brussels has decided. You feel totally powerless in the face of it. And then right-wing populists promise what? Take back control, right? That was the slogan of the Brexiteers, right? So I think it's a consequence to this in political realm. There's a promise of omnipotence and a feeling of powerlessness, and this is where right-wing populism steps in. And what I really think, because I'm in the depth of my heart, I'm a phenomenologist, right? I really want to think about my own and our experiences. What do we experience in our daily life? And I think in my daily life I experience the same, right? And I am sure you too, right? Because the remote control gives you the feeling of omnipotence, right? It's in the tip of your hands. You can get in touch with everyone you want to. You can get all the knowledge which has ever been digitalized, all the movies, all the music, everything. It's omnipotence. This thing is it's a promise of omnipotence until it somehow breaks, right? And then you can't do anything. You might be 200 meters away from the IPU and not find your way because this thing has given up its ghost. You are totally powerless now. But it's really, and you experience this also at home. I'm convinced. I think in at least in Freudian terms, it's Kränkung, right? We experience a permanent daily Kränkung by these technologies because it just doesn't do what you want it to do, right? It just doesn't update. You're really in a hurry, and it says one moment please can take ages, right? So it really it makes you experience total powerlessness. There's absolutely nothing you can do. And actually this is what it creates. It produces a total feeling of aggression in people, right? I mean the idea that you smash the computer, it would be the last attempt to go against this powerlessness, right? And by the way, I mean this might be not so important, but you really see it. I find it, if you are in psychology and psychoanalysis, with high school students. I mean, there you see. I think I'm convinced we should get rid of human beings because, when they get high school diplomas, in German the Abitur, right? I mean, this is really the promise of freedom, and all the grown-ups tell them, congratulations, this is the best point in your life, right? Now you're really free. The world is open to you, right? It's actually true biographically. It's the point where availability, attainability, accessibility, so to speak, is exploding. But these young people, most of them, they are not feeling great freedom and great power, but kind of they feel desperate. I mean, all the mental health studies of our youngsters, we are so stupid as human beings, it's unbelievable. The mental health studies of youngsters in the US as in Germany and even worse in Asia, right? They are close to committing suicide, right? Because they feel total powerlessness. This is not actually, I mean, it's not surprising. They have 20,000 courses of study to choose from in Germany. 20,000. Now, what do we intelligent grown-ups tell them? Oh, you have to find the best course of study for yourself. But first, you have to decide what you really want to do with your life. I mean, as if anyone could do this. So what they experience is total powerlessness. So you see, that's the problem. I give up now. I mean, so my claim here is uncontrollability returns as a monster, right? In fact, we do experience the world as totally uncontrollable, but it's not a resonant uncontrollability. It's a monster we are facing. It's many monsters. Now, the main question is, I have to check the watch. I forgot when I started. I have about 15 more minutes or so. So how could it be different, right? And what I now want to sell you, the final idea, right, is the transformation really I don't want to sell anything, right? I just want to think about it. The transformation, I think, is maybe it's actually going beyond the dichotomy of omnipotence and powerlessness, right? And I think maybe we should even, as I said, I think the change needs to be at the mode of our existence and language are really close together. And there might be a problem in our language. And the problem is that our languages, I mean, German, English, Spanish, Italian, French, they only know the passive and the active mode. I throw or I am thrown. It's both two bad existential forms, I think. But right, so it's throwing or being thrown, active or passive, right? So you're always either the doer, the actor, or the victim of the done to of a deed, right? But my claim is, but in fact there are many activities. There is a mode of being in the world which goes beyond this. Right? I call it the medio-passive mode. It's not just me who calls it. It comes from language, actually, because there are other languages like Greek, Hebrew, Sanskrit, also some modern languages, which do have a third mode. Right? And in Greek, it was called medio-passive. Medio-passive. It's the third voice between active and passive. And it's not just, literally medio-passive means half passive. That means it's also half active. But I think talking of half-half is a bit stupid, right? It's not that you're kind of this is really interesting. I mean, you could think of a medio-passive form of either at first you're active, then you're passive, then you're active, then you're passive, but I think that would be wrong, right? And then you could say, well, I'm half asleep and half awake. Is that medio-passivity? No, right? Medio-passivity, what I have in mind, the third voice, is a form of being in the world, relating to the world, where you are fully active and fully passive at the same time. It's a totally different form of being in the world. And the paradigm case for this I have in mind is really dancing, right? I mean, let's say you have I always say, because it's the truth, I came to this idea not by myself, but I had a student paper. It was a term paper where a student, she interpreted dancing. And she said dancing is a resonant activity, at least in some form. It was a particular dance. It wasn't a tango. It was Lindy Hop or so. It's a kind of it's a modern dance. But the point there was that it wasn't pre-decided who is leading and who is led, right? So she said when the two are dancing, it's a succession, a sequence of I'm leading, so I'm sending, I'm active, and I'm receiving the signals of the other partner, right? So but she used in her first attempt a kind of model of sending and receiving, Sender und Empfänger, no idea, sender and receiver, right? But then when we discussed the paper, we said, well, but the dance is at its climax. It's most intense when you cannot tell whether you are sending or receiving, right? When it's right in between. And I'm really, for me, it might be stupid, so tell me, right? Tell me now or tell me later. But I really think this is maybe the mode of existence we should look for, right? Being receptive and active at the same time. And the interesting thing there is that the center of agency shifts. That's really the idea I'm thinking about, right? Because when I'm sending, I'm the agent, right? And if I'm receiving, the other person is the agent. But things get interesting when you can no longer tell, is it me or is it the other? The center of agency is in between. And musicians tell you exactly the same thing, right? I mean, when in jazz bands, I've discussed this with jazz musicians, actually, and I will continue to discuss it in Berlin and elsewhere. In jazz musicians, you have a similar situation. At one time, it's the guitar player who's taking the lead, then it's the trumpet player or even the drummer, or whoever it is. But the climax, the most intense experience is when you can no longer tell who is leading and who is led. It is as if the music was the agent, right? And I believe this could even be true for a discussion. You have a long, really a fascinating conference here, right? I would really say why you come here, probably, I don't know, part of the motivation, right? And some of the expectation is moments in the discussions. It might be in a small group, right? Where it's not you tell the others what you always thought or what you find out, or you prove that your theory is right and the other theory is wrong. That's kind of what we always do, right? But sometimes there is natality. The new kicks in, and you cannot say who is the doer and who is the done to, because it's the in-between, right? It's like a circulating energy. This is the idea. Now I've said everything which will be on the following slides, right? But this is really what I want to think about. Can we think of a new mode of relating to the world? And as I said, dancing and playing music could be examples for this third voice mode of being in the world. And now the idea is maybe we can be within nature in this kind of medio-passive thing, right? Either we are there, what I said before, you have the same situation. Either we decide or nature decides, right? Either we are the doers or we are the receivers. But maybe there is a medio-passive form of being in the world, right? Listening and responding, being responsible in that sense. So I don't want to stay at this and I don't want to stay at that because I already told you. Let me just go to the resonance conception. Well, because, I had these two ideas, so to speak, independently of each other. At first I had the resonance theory, but then when I thought about the third voice, is it possible can I think of a world relationship which is neither active nor passive? Or I think neither is wrong. It's both at the same time, right, rather. And then I thought of things like, for example, listening to music. Actually, is that active or is it passive? I mean, grammatically it's active. I listen to music, but in fact, I'm receiving, right? And I find it interesting, in English you can distinguish between listening, which is the active part, and hearing, which is the passive part, right? In German it's not so easy. In both cases it's hören. We could distinguish between hören and zuhören, but it's not so easy, right? But listening to music, you can't really say whether it's active or passive. And by the way, there is something which I think distinguishes us from computers too. Listening is a fascinating human activity. I mean, it's incredible. When you really reconstruct it physically and physiologically, it's hard to believe, right? I mean, even when let's talk about music, it's much more interesting. There might be an orchestra playing, right? So what happens really is that there are tiny movements in the air which you cannot even see, and normally you cannot even feel it, but there are movements, waves in the air which somehow hit your ear. Now I always forget what comes first, but it's incredible what's going on inside the ear, right? There is something, I forgot what comes first. I mean, I know there is a kind of the bones, tiny bones. No, the bone comes last. I forgot. No, I forgot. I should have looked it up. What happens first with the hearing? But at least, I mean, I think there is it comes to, it starts with the fine hair, right? I think there are fine hair which start to move. Then the hair somehow, is it the other way around? Because there is a liquid, right? And then there are waves, which in a liquid, it's like a small lake in our ear. And then there are tiny waves. No, it starts with the bone, I'm sure, right? With the Gehörknochen. Yeah. It starts with the boar, with the Gehörknochen, right? So these waves, they somehow, they touch a bone. I mean, think of this, right? And now the bone starts to move. So the movements of the bone sets in motion small waves of liquid in our ear. And these small waves of liquid somehow touch some fine hair, right? And these fine hairs start to shake, and this is translated into electric signals, which then go to our brain and tell us that we are listening to music. And this process allows you to distinguish between the trumpet and the violin and the trombones and so on, which is incredible enough. But that's not the secret of resonance. The computer can do that too, right? I mean, very easily. It's incredible with this Shazam, can tell you what kind of song you're listening to. I can't believe that either. So this is something computers can do too. But when you really listen to music, one day you might really be moved to tears because it's your favorite piece of music. You really feel your whole existence. That's what I call vertical resonance, right? It speaks to your soul. It connects you to the universe. And the next day you listen to the very same, exactly the same happens in your ear. You listen to exactly the same music and you're not moved at all because you're depressed or angry or stressed or whatever. Now this difference, I think I cannot imagine AI to get that, to even get it, right? Being moved by something. Now this difference, of course, is what I call resonance, right? It's actually in the second case when you're moved and then something within you is responding to it. And we have this in listening to music, but also in love, right? If you fall in love, I find it really interesting to fall in love with someone. Is that active or passive? I mean, even the literally, it's very hard to tell, right? I fall in love. Is that active or passive? Right? It's in the medio-passive sense. So we have a lot of activities of this. And only later on I realized that what I had done with resonance was describing exactly this mode of relating to the world. Resonance for me is a mode of being in the world or to the world, which has 4 elements. One is something touches me. And as I said, it's not just touch in the sense of the physical motion in the ear, right? Because resonance is an acoustic term. But also in this psychological sense, something speaks to you. You feel called by something out there. You feel moved. And this other thing can be a human person which you encounter, but it can be a piece of music or a sight. You see the stars, good idea, or the mountains also. Or it can be a novel you read and you're moved to tears, right, for example. So affection is the first element. And affection, you know, it starts from the outside. I think psychologically this is so important. I mean, not all the psychological coaches and counsels, they always tell you that you need to do something. You have to be more mindful. You have to be more relaxed. You have to be more, I don't know, patient with yourself. Do something. And this is why I started with saying, no, aufhören. Stop something, right? Because resonance starts with being capable of listening to something out there, something that is calling you, right? So resonance does not start on the inside for me, it starts on the outside. But then you react to it, right? You answer it, and that's where it gives you a sense of self-efficacy. And that's the opposite of powerlessness, right? Self-efficacy, I'm capable of reaching out to the uncontrollable and interacting with it. And the consequence of this is, and this is why it's interesting for this conference, transformation. You do not stay the same in this process, listening and responding, right? So what we should try to become is responsible in this sense, being capable of being callable or being capable of affection in the first plane, being capable of answering, and this will change us. And this is, as I have said, I think that's the element of natality, right? Something is calling me. It can be music or so. And even, you know, the difference between the 2 days. One day you're moved and touched by music. The second day you are deaf to it. And what is lacking on the second day is self-efficacy, right? Answering it, reaching out, connecting to it. But once this process starts, it leads to transformation. And what I said, I think, you know, before I came up with resonance theory, I thought that there is no real free will because I was a determinist, right? I really thought, well, there must be some cause for something, right? If I come to a new idea and if I come to a new thought I have not had before, there must be some reason for this, right? And the reason it might be my stomach pain, right? Because of the pain, I was in a bad mood, and therefore I gave Marx or Fromm a new interpretation, and this is what created the new idea. That's determinism, right? So someone who knows everything could have said, could have known before, oh, Rosa today he slept, he didn't sleep well, he's in a bad mood, he's reading Fromm, he will come up with a new idea. God would have known. But after resonance theory, I changed it because I believe this process, this is the moment of natality, right? Listening and responding, and when the center of agency shifts to the in-between, it's a kind of dynamic motion, and that's the moment where the new gets born. So this is what is the uncontrollability of resonance. You cannot enforce it, right? Maybe something that is said at this conference in the next couple of days will create a resonance with you, but you cannot say, oh, it will happen on Saturday at 12, right? At this talk or at that talk. It's impossible. Well, what is even worse, if it does happen, if a situation arises, which I have described in the next couple of days, where all of a sudden a new idea is born in your conversation, in your discussions, right? No one, I believe, would be capable, I mean, not even God would be capable of predicting what the new idea will be, right? What this new moment or element will be. So that's, I would say, that's the secret of resonance. Let me think of, do we need anything of this? No. I think this is the last. This is the last thing anyway. So my claim is we need a transformation, right? And I'm a sociologist, so I'm not just thinking of individual transformation, but of societal transformation. And I think we need a societal transformation. We need a political agenda, right, which kind of institutionalizes this sense of resonance, this idea of medio-passive mode of being in the world along the four axes we can find in society, right? So one is obviously the social axis, how we relate to other people. For example, in democracy, democracy needs to be a sphere of resonance, listening to others, being responsible, right? The other is uncontrollable. He says or she says she loves in different ways, she speaks in different tongues, has different beliefs, and you listen and respond, and both are transformed. I think that's the promise of democracy in the Republican version, right? But also in love and friendship. That's the social axis of resonance, but also in the way we interact with, not just with nature, but with materiality. I mean, it's really interesting. We live in a, and you get ideas of this by Fromm too, right? We live in a dead world, right? It's kind of, its spontaneity is completely driven out of it, right? So interacting with matter, with objects in a resonant way is a possibility which we need to do, but also with animals, with plants, right? Resonance does not mean you just have to follow nature, but to create this sense. And there's an existential axis of resonance, the sense of being, what I said before, nature, history, for example, a community. I think we can develop kind of, that would be my hope, develop resonant third voice modes of interacting with all of these elements. And in psychology, of course, what needs to be done, I think I mean, as I said, there is a mental health crisis, particularly with young people, right? And so what needs to be rediscovered is the self-axis of resonance, getting in resonance with your body, with your emotion, with your biography, with your memory, maybe with your dreams, right? Setting this element of listening and responding in motion again, and therefore becoming responsible. And that's what I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much for listening.